Today we're making a Greek Xyphos, and I based my design off of this picture. Now apparently I was unable to get my recording equipment to work for basically any of the forging on this sword, so there you just saw the forged out, rough forged blade, and then here I am using my angle grinder to remove the forged scale. I realized that right at the beginning on this one, and now I'm using my belt grinder to clean up the blade. Like once the forged scale was off, I just used my belt grinder to clean up the profile, try and make it a little bit cleaner, and then try and sand off some of the marks that I left with my angle grinder. I was not particularly successful. I'm now forging out the guard, and as you'll see at the end of the video, I think it turned out pretty well. It's not exactly the same as the example, but it's a pretty cool guard. I made it out of a railroad spike, and those sparks you saw a second ago were me cutting the head off of the railroad spike. And now I'm working on putting a hole through that guard, which was tricky, but this was the only thing I had to put a hole through like that this time. Now you can see I've got the guard fitted up, and now I'm putting holes in the tang, which is as tedious as ever. And now I'm cutting up the mesquite branch that I used for the handle on my table saw. So here we go there, and now you'll be able to see me fitting up and gluing up those handle scales. I've found, and I was going to say this earlier, I didn't have time, that at this moment probably my biggest bottleneck is that cruddy belt grinder. Like that's something that I think I'm not going to be able to get a better one of for quite a while, if ever, because the nice ones are extremely expensive, and this cruddy one is definitely slowing me down on my knife making and sword making here. So now I'm getting ready to mix up some epoxy and attach those handle scales using brass pins, and also epoxied the guard so it wouldn't shift around. And there is the handle all fitted up and glued up. I did end up with a gap in the handle, but here we are. And I was able to get it down to that square shape using my belt grinder and using a belt sander, but now I've found that for actually shaping handles, it is best for me to use hand tools, because if I try to do it on the grinder, I end up putting pretty major gouges in it. And so I'm just using here a hand file to shape the handle and get it all rounded off and nice. And then I'll be switching to using sandpaper to smooth it out. Strips of sandpaper, which is the fun way to do that. And I just love the way that these handles like come together and look like smoother and smoother and nicer. I really like how white this mesquite is. It's not what I expected. I thought it'd have more wood grain, but it ends up being just really white. My wife actually thought that it was bone when I first showed her this handle. And I was like, where in the world would I have gotten bone? But here we are. All right, so still working on shaping and smoothing the handle out. And then we go to the part that I thought was really fun and was a new experience for me. I did a threaded pommel on this, because a Xyphos would usually have a pommel. And so what you just saw me doing there is I cut the tang down to about the size where I could get my, this is called a die, my die over it to put threads onto it. And that's what I'm doing here, is putting threads on with my new die. And there you can see the threaded tang that I created. And now I've got to make the pommel, and I've got to put a hole in it. I used a nut, as you'll see at the end of the video. I used a nut from a trailer hitch, but I got to put a hole in it first. That's the right size for the tap, or the tap that matches that die that I used, and then I got to thread out those holes. So that's what I'm doing here, is putting threads into those holes. And now I'm working it on. It was a little bit bent, so I did have to bend it straight, which I did there in the vise, but I did manage to get it. And then the other problem was that the bottom of the part of the tang that I'd cut was too wide, so I had to file it smaller so that the pommel would thread all the way to the bottom. But I did eventually get that to work, and here you see the finished product, and I'll let original video me finish explaining. So the Xyphos is finished. This is in the style of a Greek Xyphos, which is the kind of side sword carried by many Greek hoplites back in the classical era of Greece. The leaf-shaped blade gave me a little more trouble than I was expecting. It's a little tricky to get a blade shape like that, for a new smith at least. I made the guard here out of a railroad spike, which was pretty fun. And then the handle, I did a full tang on this one instead of a through tang. It was easier for sure, though I do have a gap there that I meant to fill in and forgot to do. That's made out of mesquite again. Here's my supply of mesquite branches that I intend to keep using for handles. And then I had a hard time trying to find a piece of metal for the pommel on this thing because I wasn't sure what to use, and ended up thinking, well, you know what's solid steel? Actually, my wife came up with this, is a trailer hitch, a ball hitch. And so we ordered one for cheap. It was only $5. But then when it got here, I was like, you know, that nut is pretty big and be pretty cool. And so that's what I ended up using for the pommel. And I threaded it, so you can see. I threaded the tang. I ground it down and then threaded it with my tap and die set that I just got, which was cool. It's a new thing I've done, so I think it looks pretty neat. So that's the Greek Xyphos. Again, this is a non-working replica. It's not sharp. It's just for some kids to play with. So that'll be an end to that one. Thanks, guys, and I will see you next time.